Got you there with Sean Delaney.
Today on What Got You There, I sit down with David Novak, who's the former CEO of Yum Brands, one of the world's largest restaurant brands. He took them from $4 billion market cap to over $32 billion. We talk all about leadership and taking charge of yourself, the importance of self-coaching, and how you, if you're a leader, can develop your people and yourself. So get ready for this great conversation with David Novak.
Got you there with Sean Delaney.
David, welcome to What Got You There. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sean, and it's a real honor to be with you.
Yeah, no, it's great to dive into a conversation around a lot of topics that I love to talk about, but one that you've explored so much of. But before we dive into leadership and coaching, I would love to know what you've learned from someone that we both deeply admire, and that's Tom Brady. Now, I know you've gotten a lot that you've learned from him over the years, but I would love to know what has really stood out when you think of Tom Brady.
Yeah, well, I just love the fact that Tom Brady is such an avid learner. And more than just an avid learner, he's an action learner. I mean, this guy is always trying to up his game, whether it's his physical well-being or whether it's his, how he throws, the ball, how he works on his footwork, he'll go to the best coach in the world for that, Tom House. He's constantly, honing his game. And I've never met anybody that is more focused on getting better at all aspects of his life. We had a great conversation about leadership when we first met. And man, I have to tell you, I've met and interviewed a lot of great leaders in my life, but I've never met anybody like Tom Brady. I mean, he is the best leader I've ever talked to.
Now, when you're around someone like a Tom Brady, is it an aura? Is it a different presence that they carry themselves with?
Well, Tom Brady is Tom Brady. He's the GOAT, so that he's in the room. Okay. And yeah, he has that presence. And, I played golf with him and Phil Mickelson, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, a group of us were playing golf together. And look, they were sitting at the foot of the master. Okay. I mean, he is there. Okay. He's there. I mean, there's no question, but what I love about Tom is he's the most humble guy in the world. He's confident. He has complete belief in his abilities, yet he's humble to know that he can't do it by himself. Okay. And I think that's one of the things I've seen in leaders that are really great. You're not going to follow somebody you don't believe in, but you're also not going to follow somebody that thinks they can get it all done by themselves. And he's humble enough to know that he's got to have great teammates. And I think that's one of the reasons why he went to Tampa Bay is he knew that, and they had the supporting cast there, certainly on the offense that could get him to where he wanted to go. But he's an amazing guy. He's always reached out to me when I had any issues, and I've always tried to help him. I really value our friendship.
David, one of the things you said is Tom's, of course, an avid learner, but he's an active learner. I would love to know how you interpret that because you just seem to light up when you say that.
Well, listen, a lot of people, learn things, but who does something with it?
Take it to action.
He takes it to action.
Yeah.
Okay. I used to think that being an avid learner was the most important thing you should look for in a leader. And then the more I thought about it, no, it's not an avid learner. It's an action learner. It's somebody who takes the learning and then really puts it to use. The other thing about Tom Brady, while we're on him, which I love, is one time we were behind in a golf game and he says, David, you can't come from behind unless you're behind. Okay. And, that's his attitude. I mean, people will write a lot better headlines if you come from behind than if you beat somebody 35-20. Okay. And, but that's how he looks at it. He reframes the negative and turns it into a positive.
Oh, that's awesome. I love those insights. You got to take those insights though, and you've got to let them lead to action there. One of the things you were mentioned a few minutes ago is of course you have to have that belief and that confidence. I would love to know, from your perspective, I mean, leading an organization with tens of thousands of employees worth billions of dollars, were there times where your inner self-belief was kind of on shaky ground about what to do? And if so, what are those times like being the head of an organization that large?
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, nobody ever has all the answers all the time. I think confidence is really a function of time and grade. Okay. you can't really be confident until you really know your stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. In the areas that I didn't know my stuff, that's the area where I was least confident in. Like, for example, early on in our tenure at Yum Brands, our food distributor went bankrupt. And that was a huge problem because
Yeah, right.
if you're selling food, you need somebody to get you the food on time, And I'd never really gone through a bankruptcy. I'd never had any experience like that. So believe me, I had a lot of sleepless nights. I mean, how am I going to get through this? But what I learned then is that you got to surround yourself with people who have been through those kinds of situations, and they'll get you out of it. And I remember, I had Dave Dino, my chief financial officer, and Chris Campbell, my chief legal officer, and Alwyn Lewis, my chief operating officer. All these people have, just amazing leaders. And they just came into my office and said, hey, don't worry, we got your back on this. Let us handle this for you. Okay. And, they kept me up to speed on what was going on. And, I'm still not a bankruptcy expert, but I got to tell you, I sure am glad I had those guys backing me up because they did a great job. But those kinds of things, when you get into those situations where you don't know what you need to know, one of the things you have to do is self-coach yourself and say, hey, I need to find the people that do know it. And that's the only way I'm going to get to the best ultimate solution for whatever organization or team that I'm leading.
Yeah, you definitely want to compress those learning cycles there. You don't want to have to figure everything out. There's people who've done it and they're pretty smart. You might want to take some advice with that. I'm always intrigued by leaders such as yourself and just the mindsets that have encapsulated their success. And I'd love to know for you, like just looking back on all the years of the success you've had, has there been a foundational mindset that you kind of just viewed as like the pillar that all else was built on?
Well, it's interesting, Sean, I guess I don't want to come off as a shill for my book, but I just written this new book. Okay. Which I think really represents a mantra that I've had throughout my life. And that is take charge of you. Okay. I think, your life is way too important. Your career is way too important to delegate it to someone else. And that's why I've written this book called Take Charge of You, How Self-Coaching Can Transform Your Life and Career. Okay. And I've always taken accountability for my own development. If I realized that I needed to become better at finance, I would go to someone and say, hey, can you help me get to this, to Wharton School of Finance and learn better at finance? Okay. If I realized that, I'm not comfortable speaking, I used to be not very good at speaking. I used to be not, just terrible. I was so nervous. I'd say, 1,000 times. And I was just, so insecure. I'd have to make some corny jokes at the beginning before I could even move forward and get rid of the nerves, So I said, hey, who can I go to that can help me become a great speaker? Okay. And now I speak to 13,000 people and I love it. I can't wait to get up there, but I learned how to do it because I self-coached myself and took accountability for becoming a better speaker because I knew that was going to be a fundamental skill. When I became the CEO of Yum Brands, I had never managed Wall Street. So I needed to learn somebody who really knew investments. So that's when I organized a way. I found a way. I did everything I could to get into Warren. And I visited Warren Buffett every year I was CEO of Yum Brands. And I talked to him about investing and how you should talk to investors. And gosh, he taught me so much. But it's that self-coaching, taking accountability for my own development. I used to do all kinds of best practice visits. I used to go, if there was a company doing something great, I'd call up the CEO and say, can I bring my team and can we meet with you? And I'd like to learn from you. And I think it's that self-coaching, self-awareness of not only myself, but also the business that I was leading, is really fundamental to my success, whatever success I have had, which is, but I said, hey, look, I'm in charge of David Novak. Nobody else is in charge of David Novak. I'm in charge of myself. And, through God's grace and the help of a lot of other people, I've been able to do some things that I don't think anybody ever expected me to do, including myself.
Complete responsibility there. It's funny. You mentioned that self-coaching, you have to take on things that you're weak in. You mentioned Buffett. he credits one of the most important decisions he ever made in his life was taking a Dale Carnegie's public speaking course, and how instrumental that was. He did that early. He knew the importance of that self-coaching and learning. You mentioned obviously being the CEO of Young Brands. Walk me through that story. How does someone go and then end up becoming, like, you would have assumed that you came from the greatest background to be able to work your way into that scenario. And I just need to know how that was even possible.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are wondering that. and thank God it worked out okay. You know, I have to go back to actually tell you a little bit about my upbringing, because it's very different. You know, my dad was a government surveyor. I lived in 23 states by the time I was in 7th grade. The biggest house we lived in was 8 feet wide by 46 feet long, and it was a trailer. Okay. And my mom would check me into these schools in these small towns up and down the United States. I'm the only guy that's ever lived in Dodge City, but I guarantee you, I'm the only guy you know that's ever lived in Dodge City, Kansas twice. Okay. But my mom would check me into these schools and say, "Hey, David, you better make friends because we're leaving." Okay. And, but my mom and dad were extremely smart. They had high school education. My dad worked his way up in the government to the point where he went as far as he could go with a high school education. And, when I look at those two people, if they would have had coaching, education, everything I had, they could have run anything. They could have started their own business. They could have done a lot of things. Okay. And I'm enormously proud of what they did accomplish with what they had. But they wanted for me, Sean, to live the American dream. Okay. That was their goal. Okay. So they wanted me to go to college. So I was the first person in my family to get a college education. And I got a degree from the University of Missouri in journalism. I loved writing, and I fell in love with advertising. And my first job out of college was at a small advertising agency where I was a copywriter. Okay. And, and my wife always laughs. She says, I was destined to be in the food service business because I was in this little cubby hole in the back of the corner office. And there was this poster of a hamburger. That was my artwork. And she said, you were always destined to get into food service. But anyway, I came up in the advertising side, and I ultimately ended up running the Frito-Lay account, which was a part of PepsiCo. I ran Doritos and Lay's potato chips and, their big brands. And the president of Frito-Lay recommended me to the president of Pizza Hut to be their chief marketing officer. So I went from the agency side to the client side and ran marketing for Pizza Hut. We had enormous success. We came up with a great marketing campaign, making it great. We did great things, doubled sales and profits. And, 4 years later, Roger Enrico, who was the chairman of PepsiCo, comes to me and says, David, I want you to run marketing sales for Pepsi. So I got promoted to go do that. And then I realized that I needed to get out. I did some self-coaching again. I realized the only way I was going to get a division president job at Pepsi was that I had to demonstrate that I wasn't just a marketing person. I didn't have an MBA. I had to demonstrate that I could run a P&L, that I could, run operations. So when that job came open at Pepsi, I begged my boss for the opportunity. I said, look, if I don't do a good job, you can either fire me or put me back into marketing, but I've got to get that experience to show that I'm capable of running a division here. And he let me do it. And, I did it for a couple of years and did it well enough to where I actually got promoted to KFC. And, I loved food service. I loved it. We turned around KFC. It was a great, KFC had never done well as a part of PepsiCo since they had acquired it. And we did I went into a bad situation, turned it around. And then I got asked to go be the CEO of Frito-Lay. Well, I did myself some self-coaching there, and I said, I love Frito-Lay and I like Pepsi, but I don't like packaged goods as well as I like the restaurant business. I love the restaurant business. It's all about food, which I loved, all about people, which I love working with, and all about marketing because you got to get the sales. And so it really had a premium on everything that I really love. So I actually turned down the Frito-Lay job. Now, I didn't know at the time that PepsiCo was thinking about spinning off the restaurants. And that's why they wanted me to go to Frito-Lay, okay, because they wanted to keep me in the PepsiCo family. I said no. And then I ended up running Pizza Hut as well. And then I was running 2 of the 3 brands when PepsiCo decided to spin off the restaurants. And I was in the right place at the right time and got the opportunity of a lifetime. But, I just did I just took whatever job I had, Sean, and I tried to do it as good as I could. And then I'd look around and say, who has the next job? And then I'd say, what do they have that I don't have? Okay. And if they didn't have anything, I would really go after that job. If they did have some things that I needed to develop, I self-coached myself to develop them. And I took charge of my development. And, I was very competitive, very ambitious. I make no bones about it. I always wanted the next job, but I never necessarily knew that I would be a CEO. I kind of felt like I'd run something someday, but I didn't know if I'd be running the dry cleaners, let alone, a company like Yum Brands. But that was the greatest ride in my life. I loved it. Did it from 1997 to 2016.
Yeah, David, that's one hell of a journey there. One thing I need to know. So you mentioned two of the CEOs of the companies actually recommended you and said David would be excellent in this position. What about you stood out in their minds, right? Like there was a ton of very driven, smart individuals, but there was a reason they said, David, that's the guy.
I don't know. I've always had a skill of taking people with me. I've always been able to build and align teams. In fact, Roger Enrico asked me to do a program for PepsiCo executives on taking people with you. He saw that in me. Okay. The ability to get people marching against the things that really matter most. And I always took an interest in more than my job. I really think this is really important insight for people to think about. You not only need to do your job, you got to be thinking about how you do the person 2 jobs ahead of each job. And then if you ever get in front of that person, let them know the 5 things you'd do if you were them, so they could see that you got the potential to have a job like theirs someday. And so I always really believed in whatever company I was on, whatever team I was on, and I wanted to make that team great. And, I would do everything I could, not only with my job, but any way I could help other people or give other ideas to other people so that we could really grow the whole ball of wax. And I think that shows that you have potential.
What about taking people with you, the people who, I hate to say underneath you, but you're just at a higher level? What can leaders in positions like that, what can they do to both empower those underneath them, but then also help them on their journey?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing you can do is let people know that you need them. Okay. There's this rule in leadership, no involvement, no commitment. So you need to really get people involved. Okay. You need to remember that no one will care about you until you care about them. So it's really important that people know that you're invested in them. And guess what? They'll be invested in you. The other thing I learned by visiting Walmart is, the more you know, the more you care. So remember to let people know everything that you know about the business and what you're learning all along the way. I mean, that's why I write my books. Okay. Because I'm blessed. I mean, I've had amazing experiences. I want to share those. And I find that when I give my learnings to other people, it always comes back to you in spades. Okay. And those kind of things, so 3 things that I just mentioned there. Okay. Getting people involved, letting them know that you care about them, communicating everything you know about the business, and then asking them, most importantly, what would you do if you were me? That's the most powerful leadership question you could ever ask the people that you have the privilege of leading. What would you do if you were me? What would you do with these same set of facts that we're all looking about if you were me? Help me define reality. This is how I see it. What do you think? Okay. When you get people involved in that with you, they're going to follow you to the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. What's so important too, is that requires humility from the leader, right? Like being open to new ideas, exploring ways that you're thinking might not be the best. So I just think that's awesome. I love when we find great questions like that. That is an extraordinary question. Yeah. I would love to know, David, for someone who is in that top leadership role, is there some advice you'd wish someone had given you day one that took you years to learn in that position?
Yeah. That's a really good question, Sean. And I think the answer I'd have to give you in all honesty is no. Now that doesn't mean that, there isn't a lot of stuff I could have learned a lot faster, but I just think for me, the process of going through the life, the way how I went through it, I wouldn't change a thing. For me, I have to tell you, I'm at the end of the movie's was really good. And the movie's still running. I'm doing a sequel now that I love just as much as the first one. So I don't think I'd change anything because, there are a lot of things I wish I would have done that I didn't do. But you know what? It all ended up making me David Novak, making me the leader who I am, giving me the background that I have, the experiences I have that allowed me ultimately to lead. And I think the one thing I would say is your journey's never going to be a straight line up. Okay. You're going to have a lot of things that take you below the line. In fact, we actually, I have our people, do what I call a lifeline, where you plot your life on the axis of the bottom axis, and you plot the things in your life that are above the mean, and then you go below and the things that were, not so hot. Okay. And my lifeline is up and down. It was not a straight line. Okay. But I think the reason why we do that is it's important for people to look at themselves and other people to see how you get to where you got. And we're all going to have our struggles along the way. And, when you're having those struggles, when you're coming up, you think your life is over. I remember I gave a big presentation once and I absolutely flopped. And I was so nervous when I did it. My wife comes home. She sees me on the bed. I got my head in the pillow. Okay. Still had the suit on. This is back when you wore suits. Okay. and I'll tell you what, that I thought it was over. I thought I'd never be what I thought I could be, and et cetera, but it also made me realize I got to learn how to be a good speaker. And people laugh when I tell them that I had problems with communication and speaking and all that, but I did.
What do you recommend to someone who, you've got perspective now. You can look back and be like, when I had my head on the pillow, I was still in my suit. When you come home, the spouse is still in the suit, but that's never a good scenario. So I'm wondering, what can you say to a young up and coming leader during those times? Is there anything that you did that you were able to root yourself in to help you get through that onto the next phase?
Well, I think you always have to look yourself in the mirror. The most important thing that a leader can do is define reality for the business and then create hope. I think that's Napoleon said that: define reality and then create hope. Okay. So you need to look yourself. You have a bad day. You really are in the tank. You really sucked at something. It was just, you wonder if you're ever going to get back. Why? Define reality. What was it? Were you not prepared? Were you nervous because you hadn't done it before? What is it? Understand what the reality is. And then go back and think about your personal highlight reel. Create a personal highlight reel for yourself. When were all those times that you actually did something where it turned out good? Okay. That's when you got to go to your personal highlight reel and say, that was a bad day, but I've done some good things before. I can get back and get on the saddle and, go forward. But you gotta diagnose why it happened. Take accountability, be self-aware, figure out what your action plan is going to be so it never happens again. And then have the hope and belief in yourself that you are going to be able to get good at this someday.
You mentioned Napoleon there. I'm gonna butcher the quote, but it was something along the lines of, someone will follow you into battle for a gold star. You talk about like building and taking people with you. It's about creating that connection there. I just love that line, thinking about how we're all in this together. You mentioned the personal highlight reel. I know you mentioned that moment on the bed. Is there a moment you can look back on? First one to graduate college in your family, that you look back and there was a pivotal moment in your career where you just look back and you say, you know what? I'm incredibly proud of what I was able to do there.
Well, I've been lucky because I've been able to ring the bell twice. Okay. The New York Stock Exchange, that's when, being a CEO of a public company, that was like, with my family up there, ringing that bell. And I did it a second time. And the second time was when I was CEO of the year. And I remember I went to the New York Stock Exchange and they had a dinner after we rang the bell and all this. And it was in honor of this award that I got. And my wife walks in with me and she looks around the room and she sees a picture of Jack Welch and she sees a picture of Larry Bossidy and Herb Keller. And she looked at me and she goes, and my picture is going to go on this wall too. She looks at me and she says, "What in the hell are you doing in here?" But it was a proud moment, not just for me, but for our company, because it showed how far we had come. Because when we were spun off from PepsiCo, we were the ugly ducklings of PepsiCo, had poor returns, didn't have at that time a really admired business, but we ended up with one of the great global companies in the world.
Yeah, what you were able to do there is just very impressive, to say the least. I'm wondering, when was the realization for you around the importance of coaching? I mean, because this has been instrumental. Like, when was that light bulb moment for you?
Yeah. I tell you what, you don't know it when you're getting it. Okay. A lot of times. Yeah. Okay. But when I look back, I realize that I was really blessed. Everybody that I work for ended up being a president or a CEO of a company, and everybody really took an active interest in me. So I never had a bad boss. And that's why I believe in coaching so much, because I saw the power that it had for me. But I also see the fact that there are so many bad bosses out there. In fact, I'd love to declare war on bad bosses. I mean, it's just like, but they're out there. If you think about it, 82% of the people, according to Gallup, are not engaged at work. That's an indictment of extremely poor leadership. And one of the reasons why we wrote this book, Take Charge of You, is that people aren't getting the coaching that they want, and they don't have I wrote this with Jason Goldsmith, who's a sports performance coach. I'm a business coach. Most people can't afford David Novak as a coach or Jason Goldsmith as a coach, but what we both have a passion for is helping other people. And that's why we wrote this book, is that, we can give people the tools that they need to go through the coaching process to coach themselves to where they want to go and achieve the goals that will give them the most joy in their life. And, I think being other directed also gives you a lot of joy as well. I think the happiest people in the world, Sean, I'm sure you know this, they're other directed. They're not focused 100%. On themselves.
No, absolutely. I'm wondering for you, you've worked with so many people before. What makes for, I'm just going to call them a student, what makes for a great coachable student? I'm thinking about the people now that are like, you know what? Yeah, it's time I step up and I get a coach or I do some self-coaching here. What's crucial for someone in that role? What do they need to do really well?
I think you have to open yourself up to growth. You have to bring a growth mindset to the party. You have to say, hey, I've got some talent, but I need to get better. How do I leverage my strengths? How do I make sure my weaknesses don't derail me? But you got to open yourself up to really having a frank self-assessment of who you are today and then what do you want to be tomorrow. I think when you do that, you're going to be, a great student. Don't you just love people that you get around you that are just picking your brain, wanting to figure out, how you get to where we go. Like when we get through this podcast, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I want to know, how have you built this great podcast? I have my How Leaders Lead podcast. We're doing really well. And I get to interview a lot of great people, and I've got great contacts and it's working, but I want that podcast to become the best in the world. So, I want to learn how you've done. You're doing it because you're doing great things, so you like, that being a constant student, having this quest to get better at whatever you're doing, I think is really important.
Yeah, David, I mean, you hit on that quest right there, right? That curiosity even you have. At the beginning of this conversation, you're talking about being around Tom Brady and you're just trying to learn again and again. Same thing, right? Like, I do this podcast because I love talking to people like yourself, leaders. It's like, okay, what can I learn from them? How can I help others? You mentioned that part earlier about like sharing what you've learned, bringing others with you, right? Like unlocking that potential in someone else. I mean, that's infectious. It's tough to deny. And when you see those students, those people that are showing up as curious, growth mindset, ready to learn, I mean, that I'm assuming as a coach, you've got to be fired up. That's exactly who you want to work with.
That's who you want to have working. And the people who don't have it, you want them to go somewhere else and make some other company terrible. Okay. But not yours. Okay. I always believe in coaching first, you have to coach people, and give them really good feedback so that they can adjust, and sometimes you got to hit people with a 2x4. Okay. Just so that they really get it. But, most people will respond, but sometimes people don't. And in all seriousness, I always wanted those people to go to some other company and make other people miserable, but not ours. Okay. But I love that student that wants to get better, and for all the right reasons, that wants to be able to take on more responsibility for all the right reasons, that wants to learn how to help others be the best they can be for all the right reasons. And it ultimately, it comes back to you anyway.
I'm wondering, when you have someone that come and they want to start working with you, you first get in the room with them. What are those first few minutes like? I'm just wondering what you're trying to assess or figure out within them.
Well, I look a lot at body language. By the time I would get to interviewing people, they'd already been screened for their ability to get results. So what I look at, I always try to get a character. Okay. And I like to see how somebody's sitting on the sofa. Are they like leaning back, like, they got this in the bag? I like somebody, leaning forward. I like them on the front. I like them. I want them, I want to see them, in the sales mode. I want them to convince me, that they've got what it takes to be successful. But I always had a lot of questions I asked, but the most important question I asked myself was always at the end of the interview. And it wasn't something I asked them. It's something I asked myself, is, would I want my daughter to work for that person? Okay. And if I couldn't get to the point where I would want my daughter, Ashley, to work for that person, I wouldn't hire her. And same thing you can say, would I want to work for that person? Would I want to be on that person's team? If I couldn't get to the yes on that, it was always a no for me.
David, once again, what amazing question there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, because you must have dealt with this multiple times. There's always, this person's got great character, the person doesn't have great character, but the skill is there. How did you weigh that through?
One without the other is unacceptable.
Okay.
You can have a short-term, opportunity to tap into one or the other. Okay. But over the long term, it's not going to work. If you don't have character, it's not going to happen. Okay. You're going to derail sooner or later. Okay. If you can't get results, you're going to derail. So I always said, hey, I'm greedy. I want both. Jim Collins called it the magic of the and. Well, I like to, one of the things I always look for with people is, are they smart and do they have heart? Smart with heart was a big thing. Do they got the IQ points that you need? The heart to work with people and appreciate other people. And, obviously you got to translate that into performance.
Yeah. I think a lot about the comedian Steve Martin's line, be so good they can't ignore you. It's like, if you're showing up in your character being so good they can't ignore you, and same thing with the results you're actually producing, I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing all right. One of the things you mentioned with coaching is these people, they need to know themselves, and you seem incredibly self-aware. I'm wondering, are there any things you've done over the years that have really just helped you get to a layer or two deeper on yourself?
Well, every year I've been doing this for a long time, probably 25, 30 years. I don't know. I get lost in the years, but at January 1st, I sit down and I do, what am I today? What do I need to be tomorrow? Okay. So like, for example, when I was running Young Brands, one of the things I am is passionate, as you might be able to tell. Okay. But what's the problem with passion? Okay. And enthusiasm is that you can absolutely overwhelm people. Okay. Intimidate people and scare the hell out of them, especially if you're the CEO. So I would say I got to temper my passion and enthusiasm. Okay. On a skill side, I might say, geez, I'm a really great traditional marketer. I mean, when it comes to doing TV commercials and traditional advertising and consumer insights, I am really top notch. But how am I going to be better? I'm lost in digital. Okay. I got to get better at social. I got to understand how to do digital marketing, And so what that would do is I figured out who's the best person in our company at digital marketing. And at that time it was Tressie Lieberman. And I called her up. I said, look, you coach me on digital, I'll coach you on leadership. And, we did reverse mentoring to a certain extent, but I did this every year, and I recommend it to people. I call it my 3x5 exercise. Just sit down, really take a look at yourself. What are you today? What do you need to be tomorrow to be even more effective? Okay. And, I do it, I even physically, I weigh, I gotta, I weigh 210. Okay. I want to maintain that. Okay. And get stronger muscle mass as I get older. Okay. But you just kind of say, this is what, this is what I need to do to be even better and live a better, more positive life.
Yeah, no. I mean, so crucial. I get kind of confused when there's people who've identified where they're at, haven't looked to where they want to get to. And when they do, they're unwilling to close that gap. So I love hearing some of these practices you've done. Yeah. You mentioned at the start of the year, you're doing that. Is there anything you do on a daily basis? I kind of think of these as like non-negotiables, right? Like these are keystone for me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do is I put that 3x5 card on my refrigerator. I see it every day. Okay. The other thing I do is I try to actually start my day the night before. So, I always think about, in fact, you'll probably think I'm crazy, but I have a pillow in my bed that says plan. Okay. So before I go to bed, I think about what meetings I have. Okay. Who I'm going to be with, what's going to make that successful meeting. Okay. What would be a great outcome? What are the issues I'm going to have to deal with this person or that person? And how can I really, make that time as productive as it can possibly be? Okay. So I would plan out how I could make the next day, just like an athlete, you're going to play a golf course and you visualize the 18 holes and you say, okay, but you think about how you want to play the holes. I think about how I want to play my business life that day. Okay. And then when I wake up in the morning, I always start out by working out because I think, I want to get my energy level up. Then I would come back and I would write down 3 things I'm grateful for. I do gratitudes every day because I believe it's very important for you to get yourself in a grateful state. You make your best decisions when you're grateful, your worst decisions when you're angry. And so I always tried to move myself up to the mood elevator where I could get as grateful as I could possibly be and be aware of where am I on the mood elevator? Am I mad? Am I pissed off about something? I better be not make a decision in that framework. Okay. But if I'm grateful, I can make a really good decision. So those are some of the things that I would do. And as I got more and more established in my career, I realized, Sean, that nobody really wanted to have a meeting with me at 10 o'clock until after 10, because I'm more of a morning person. Okay. I'm an afternoon person. I'm not an early morning person. So I started scheduling all my meetings after 10. And then I would use my time when I went to work until 10 to really reflect on the things I needed to do strategically or with investors or whatever, but it's sort of my private time.
No, it's so important to understand those oscillatory type nature of your day, of how you best operate. I'm just following my curiosity here. I have to know, being the CEO of a company that large, I can only imagine the amount of responsibilities you have day to day. While you're actively in that role, what does that self-development process look like? Like how much time are you even able to afford to give yourself each day?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always had really good people around me. Okay. And it's amazing how much more time you have when you have really good people. But I organized my calendar around the 3 things that mattered most, people, customers, and finance. Okay. And so I would organize how I spend my time around those 3 things. Okay. The other thing is when you're a CEO, you can't believe how much time you spend on airplanes. Okay. Now you can spend your time sleeping. You can spend your time, talking to everybody, or you can spend your time reflecting on what needs to be done. I use that one-on-one time with myself in those airplanes. A lot of times I'd be on a plane flying by myself somewhere, or, man, that was powerful times. That's when I was most dangerous because, man, when I came back to that office on Monday morning, I had 5 ideas. My biggest problem was, making sure we'd already done the ideas we needed to do before I moved on to the next 5.
Oh, no, David, I would love hearing about that, right? Like as someone who tends to come up with a lot of ideas, how do you make sure you're not allowing those new ideas to interfere and take away from the potential really good ideas you already have?
I think you tell people around you that this is a problem you have.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. And you ask for help. Well, I'm a very creative guy. That's, And creative guys are good because you can come up with a lot of ideas, but they're very dangerous because you can end up having so many ideas, you're not focused and you don't execute what really matters most.
Yeah.
So I constantly try to remind myself of where are we at in the journey of executing the things that I know are really important to us. Okay.
Yeah. No, I can just only imagine the number of ideas coming as a former copywriter there. I'm sure you can whip out some ideas pretty quickly. I do want to know, like, as this next step of growth, even for you in writing the book, Take Charge of You, like when does that moment happen? Or what is it where you're like, you know what, I need to bring this to fruition so other people can learn from this?
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, I have a great relationship with my co-author, Jason Goldsmith, and he's a sports performance coach, and he helped Jason Day become number one in the world and Justin Rose become number one in the world in golf. And so I actually got in touch with him to help me with my game, because I realized that I had a lot of talent, but I'd kind of choke it when I needed to hit the big shot there, Sean, and I thought, you got to help me work through that. And he did, he helped me, and I've actually been able to win a couple things since he started working with me. But he became like one of my best friends. And, he would teach me in sports and I teach him in business. He's got a sports technology business called Mustard, which is a startup which he started with Tom House. And, he would ask my advice on that. And he would also ask my advice on how he builds his sports coaching business, his sports performance business. And we realized that we both came at coaching in a very similar way. And I said, let's write a book. I had the idea, let's write a book and let's do it together. And I want to do something that's different on coaching. And then we came up with the idea of self-coaching and making that a real moniker and something. And this was before COVID and all that. Now self-coaching is, like you can imagine, with the Great Resignation and all this stuff, the lack of coaching, the fact that people are working virtually. This is like right down mainstream. This is like, we can't believe the response this book has already gotten, and we haven't even published it yet. Companies are ordering books, and our pre-order sales have already exceeded our expectations. It's because it's so needed. Okay. And that was kind of what it was. It was just like, we've got all this experience. And like I said earlier, is that, when you have experience and you don't pass it on, you're being selfish. And, this is our opportunity to pass on what we've learned. And there's no profit motive in this at all. There's, I've got my David Novak leadership program. I've got my podcast, all the stuff. It's all just to share with other people the contacts I have, the learnings that I have, so that you can be the best leader you can be. Because there's just not enough leaders in this country right now. It's a big problem. Don't you wish we had a really phenomenal president in the last 20 years? It would have been really nice. I don't care which side of the aisle, but where's the person that can make people proud of being an American today? Okay. Where's that person that, can bring both sides together? People say, oh, it can't happen today. I say that's bullshit. I say what we need is a leader out there to get that done, and it can happen. Okay. And I'm hoping that of all the stuff that we do somewhere along the line, we might just create that one leader that can make a difference in our country someday.
Yeah. You mentioned bringing people along with you. You never know what piece of advice, what book is going to alter the trajectory for someone in their life and create a more positive outcome for other people. You mentioned if you don't share, it's very selfish. David, I have to know, what did you learn about performing under pressure? Anything for anyone on the golf game or the tennis court that we can use about performing under pressure here?
Yeah. I think you have to get yourself in a neutral state.
Love that. Yeah. I'm a huge believer in, yep.
If you get too excited, it's not going to work out good for you. And if you're too nervous, it's not going to work out. So, breathing is really important. Getting yourself in a neutral state. Get so prepared, okay, that you're ready. And that preparation means that you have process and discipline around what really matters. Okay. If you put process and discipline around what really matters, and you execute it when the crunch happens, you're going to perform much higher than somebody that's it does what comes to them at the moment. Okay. So I think, people always talk about being process focused, not results focused. I think that's great. One other thing too, it's being focused on your target. That applies to the golf, obviously, but it also applies to business, and particularly like in speaking. When I decided to stop listening to myself, stop being perfect, just making sure that I'm talking to you, Sean, and nobody else, and not worried about whether I'm stumbling or, tripping over a word or whatever, all of a sudden I became a really good speaker. Okay. When I'm focused one-on-one with somebody, okay, and I'm giving them coaching and I'm focused on the target of helping that person, boy, it's amazing what happens. Okay. If you're working on a business problem, what's your target? What do you want to have happen? So I think target is a huge thing, and I think that helps you get through the pressure moments and focus on what matters most and how you get there. Okay. But I really believe that getting in the neutral state, having process, being focused on what you want to accomplish with each person and each business situation, and thinking through how you really make that happen in a calm light of day, I think you will perform under pressure.
Oh, David, that's exceptional right there. I feel like I just got a master class in performance there. So this is fantastic. David, it's just so apparent how curious you are, how such a self-directed learner you are. If you could do this, I know you do this with the podcast, but long form conversation, just let's even think about spending 6 months with someone you're going to learn from, dead or alive. Is there someone you would love to just be able to just surround yourself with and learn from?
Oh my, I have so many people that I go to already, that have imparted such wisdom to me. It's like, I'm really blessed to have Ken Langone, the co-founder of Home Depot. You might have seen him on Squawk Box, and he's basically NYU Langone. He's the man behind all of that, and giving med students scholarship, free tuition. This guy's like, but I've been around him for 20 years, even longer, and this guy's amazing, and but I've got a lot of those kind of people in my life, and but I wouldn't trade anybody for the relationship I've had with Ken Langone. My wife was having some health problems, and this guy's a multi-billionaire. Everybody knows it. He calls me and says, "David, I got to spend some time with you." And I said, "Well, that's really nice of you, Ken." He says, "Let's go get an ice cream cone." The guy picked me up, took me to Dairy Queen, and got me an ice cream cone. Okay. Now this is a guy knows every captain in the industry, has done everything in the world. Okay. But knows the importance of a kind gesture. Okay. I mean, this is a guy who treats everybody that way. And, and I get to benefit from him, from an ice cream cone to like, what's the most significant thing happening in business, talking about those kinds of things, I mean, I got to tell you, it's really something else to have people like that in your life. But, so it's hard for me to move beyond the people that are already influencing me and doing great things.
Yeah, David, it's really funny you actually mentioned Ken. I was talking to a friend, and he's probably the most significant mentor in my life. And he brought up something he was going through. And who does he bring up? Ken Langone. This is literally the other day, and about the impact he was having last week on him. So yeah, it's just funny when you hear a name multiple times in 1 week, someone like Ken. But David, this has been such a deep conversation around self-coaching, leadership, just basically taking charge of you, which is the book title. Where do you want to direct the listeners, and what else do you want them to know about the new book that you've worked so hard on?
Well, it comes out March 22nd. Okay. You can go to takecharge.com, takechargeofyou.com and pre-order if you'd like. I just hope it's a book that you read and you pick up a few things that'll really change the course of your career, or help you take where you're already at to a whole different level. So, but I'm very excited about it, Sean. It's great to be on your show, to be able to talk about it. And, I want to thank you for doing what you do. because, the title of your show is amazing. It's a great show, and it's, you got to keep changing your game. What got you there won't get you there. And it's great to meet you in person. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your show.
Thanks, David. And as always, everyone, all of that will be linked up in the show notes. That way you can quickly pick up the book, Take Charge of You. But David Novak, I can't thank you enough for joining us on What Got You There.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Got you there with Sean Delaney.
And I want to thank you for watching another powerful episode of the What Got You There podcast. We drop new episodes every single Sunday. So if you subscribe to the page, you'll be the first one to see these powerful episodes. Remember, we deconstruct world-class performers to understand their strategy, tactics, and the routines they've used to help them become world-class in what they do. So if you want to understand and then implement these into your own life, you're going to want to subscribe to the page. Remember, we also put out a weekly newsletter called Momentum Monday, which is just a quick synthesis of everything I've been reading, listening to, and watching behind the scenes. You can stay up to date and follow everything we're doing at whatgotyouthere.com.
Got you there with Sean Delaney. Got you there.